The August sun hit Tulsa like a punishment. Marcus Delano wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a dark smear of grease across his temple. He stood in the middle of Delano and Sons Auto Repair, a name that felt like a cruel joke now, since there were no sons working alongside him anymore, just him, a part-time kid named Ricky, who showed up 3 days a week, and the ghost of his father's ambition hanging from every rusted tool on the wall. The shop on South Peoria Avenue had seen better decades. The paint on the sign outside had faded so badly that passing cars could barely read the name. One of the hydraulic lifts had been broken for 4 months, and Marcus hadn't had the money to fix it. The waiting area still had the same plastic chairs his father had bought in 1987. Orange, cracked, uncomfortable, and a coffee machine that worked only when it felt like it. Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his banking app for the 3rd time that morning, as if the number would somehow change between glances. It didn't. The checking account showed $214.53. The business account showed $88. Ooh. There were 2 invoices overdue from parts suppliers, a property tax bill he'd been ignoring since June, and a call from the bank about the small business loan he'd taken out 18 months ago and was now 3 payments behind on. He put the phone back in his pocket and stared at the empty bay in front of him. Outside, a car drove slowly past the shop without stopping, just like the last 6 cars. Mr. Delano? Ricky Suarez, 19 years old and perpetually wearing a red bandana around his wrist, appeared from behind the parts shelf holding a printout. He was a good kid, honest, hardworking, slightly afraid of Marcus on bad days, which were most days lately. "Someone dropped this off yesterday when you were at lunch," Ricky said, extending the paper. "Said it was a flyer about a salvage auction over in Broken Arrow." Marcus took the paper without much interest. Salvage auctions were common around Tulsa, people offloading old farm equipment, busted trailers, vehicles that had been abandoned or repossessed. He'd been to a few over the years, mostly to buy cheap parts he could refurbish and resell at a thin margin. He skimmed the flyer. It was for a place called Hargrove Salvage and Towing, out on East 71st Street in Broken Arrow, about 20 minutes east of his shop. The auction was scheduled for Saturday morning, 2 days away. There was a grainy photograph of some of the lots, a crushed sedan, a tractor missing its front axle, a pile of engine blocks, and at the far edge of the image, partially obscured by what looked like a chain-link fence, the outline of a large truck. Marcus almost handed the flyer back. Then something made him look at the truck again. It was hard to tell much from the photo. The image was low resolution, printed on standard paper from what was clearly a home printer, but the truck appeared to be a full-size commercial rig, a semi maybe, or a heavy-duty pickup with an extended bed. Something about the shape of it felt familiar in a way he couldn't name. "You going?" Ricky asked. "Probably not," Marcus said. He folded the flyer and put it in his back pocket. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table of the small house he rented on East 26th Street, 3 bedrooms, one of which had been empty since his ex-wife Carla left 4 years ago. The house was clean but worn, the kind of place that looked like someone had tried hard for a while and then slowly stopped trying. There were dishes in the drying rack, a grocery list on the refrigerator held up by a magnet shaped like the state of Oklahoma, and a pair of soccer cleats by the front door that belonged to his son. Dylan Delano, 16 years old, sat across from him eating a bowl of cereal for dinner because Marcus had forgotten to defrost the chicken. Dylan had his mother's dark eyes and his father's jaw, and a quiet, observational intelligence that sometimes unnerved Marcus, the feeling that his son understood things Marcus wasn't ready to say out loud. "Dad," Dylan said, not looking up from his bowl. Mrs. Patterson called again. Marcus set down his fork. "About what?" "About the registration fee for the fall semester. She said if it's not paid by the end of the month, my spot in the engineering program gets reassigned." The fee was $340. Marcus had known about it for 6 weeks. "I'll handle it," Marcus said. Dylan looked up then, and there it was, that look. Not accusatory, not angry, just careful. The look of a kid who had learned sometime around age 12 that I'll handle it didn't always mean what it was supposed to mean. "I know you will," Dylan said, and went back to his cereal. Marcus stared at his plate for a long time after that. Later, after Dylan had gone to his room, Marcus sat on the front porch with a beer he hadn't really wanted, and the salvage auction flyer unfolded in his lap. He read it again, more carefully this time. The auction started at 9 in the morning. Lots were sold as is, no guarantees, cash or certified check only. Minimum bid on most items was $50. The truck in the photo listed simply as Lot 14, 1989 Ford F800. Condition unknown, salvage title, had a starting bid of $100. $100. Marcus had $214 in his checking account. He thought about Dylan's registration fee. He thought about the bank loan. He thought about his father, Raymond Delano, who had built that shop from nothing in 1979, with a used floor jack and a handshake reputation, and who had died believing his son would carry it forward. He thought about what it would mean to let all of it collapse. Then he thought about what it might mean if the truck had something salvageable, an engine in decent shape, a transmission, a rear axle that could be parted out. A 1989 Ford F800 with a working powertrain could fetch $300–400 in parts alone if he was lucky, maybe more if the frame was solid. It wasn't a plan, it was barely a prayer. But Marcus Delano had run out of better options. He folded the flyer, went inside, set his alarm for 7 a.m., and went to bed. Hargrove Salvage and Towing occupied a wide, flat lot behind a corrugated metal fence on the eastern edge of Broken Arrow. The morning was already hot when Marcus arrived at 8:45. The kind of dry Oklahoma heat that arrived without ceremony and stayed without apology. He'd driven the shop's old service truck, a 2003 Chevy Silverado with a trailer hitch and a toolbox bolted to the bed, figuring that if he won anything worth taking, he'd need to haul it. The lot was bigger than he expected. Rows of vehicles stretched back from the entrance in rough lines: cars, trucks, motorcycles, a couple of boats on rusted trailers, or a school bus that had been painted over in faded yellow primer, and toward the back near the far fence, the heavy machinery. A small crowd had gathered near the auctioneer's table, maybe 30 people, mostly men, many of them wearing work boots and the particular expression of someone calculating value at a glance. Marcus walked the rows slowly, hands in his pockets, assessing. He found Lot 14 in the second-to-last row, parked between a gutted RV and a concrete mixer that had seen its last rotation sometime during the Clinton administration. The truck was bigger than the photo had suggested. It was a 1989 Ford F800, a medium-duty commercial truck, the kind used for local deliveries, utility work, construction sites. It was painted a color that might once have been dark green but had oxidized into something closer to gray-brown. The cab was intact but severely weathered. The windshield had a long crack running diagonally from the lower driver's side to the upper passenger corner. Both side mirrors were missing. The front bumper was bent at an angle that suggested a collision, probably minor, probably years ago. The tires were flat, all 6 of them, but the sidewalls looked intact, like they'd simply deflated over time rather than blown. Marcus walked around the truck twice. He crouched and looked under the frame. He stood on the running board and peered through the cracked windshield at the cab interior, bench seat cracked and dusty. Dashboard faded, a pair of old work gloves on the passenger seat, an air freshener in the shape of a pine tree hanging from the rearview mirror, bleached completely white by years of sun exposure. He checked the engine compartment. The 7.8-liter inline 6 looked rough but not destroyed. It was dirty, oil-crusted, draped in the particular gray dust that accumulates on machinery that has sat untouched for years, but the block appeared intact. No obvious cracks, no catastrophic rust on the external components. Marcus stood back and considered. Beside him, a heavy-set man in a canvas vest was writing something in a small notebook. He glanced over at Marcus. "You looking at the F800?" the man asked. Thinking about it, Marcus said. "Don't bother," the man said, without hostility, just the flat certainty of someone sharing a practical observation. "I already looked it over. Rear axles seized, differentials probably shot, and the fuel tank's been welded shut at some point. Weird modification. Don't know what that's about, but it means you can't even check if there's fuel contamination without cutting it open." He shrugged and turned back to his notebook. "Parts might be worth something, I guess. Frame's actually pretty solid, but it's a project, not a flip." "Fuel tanks welded shut?" Marcus repeated. "Yep. Clean weld, too. Professional work, not something somebody did in their driveway." The man flipped his notebook closed. "Anyway, good luck if you bid on it." He walked away toward the front of the lot. Marcus stood there for another minute, looking at the truck. A sealed fuel tank was strange. It was the kind of thing you didn't do by accident. Welding a fuel tank shut required intention, equipment, and a reason. He didn't know what the reason was. He wasn't sure it mattered. The frame was solid, the engine might be salvageable, and the asking price was $100. He went and registered for the auction. Lot 14 came up 40 minutes into the proceedings. There were only 3 bidders who raised their paddles: Marcus, a young guy in a University of Tulsa hat who dropped out at $110, and an older man who seemed more interested in the concrete mixer next to it and bowed out at $95 with a distracted wave. Marcus got the truck for $100. He handed over the cash, signed the paperwork, and arranged to return Monday morning with a flatbed to pick it up. Driving back to Tulsa, the sun high and merciless over the flat Oklahoma landscape, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not happiness, exactly. Not confidence. Just the faint, fragile sensation of having made a move, of being in motion rather than standing still while the walls closed in. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. A text from Dylan. "How'd it go?" Marcus smiled for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Bought a truck," he typed back at a red light. "Come help me with it this weekend." Dylan's reply came back in seconds. "What kind?" "The kind that's going to pay your registration fee." There was a pause. Then, "You sure about that?" Marcus looked out at the highway stretching ahead of him, flat and long and shimmering in the August heat. He wasn't sure about anything, but he put the truck in drive and headed home. Monday arrived with low clouds and the smell of rain that never quite came, that particular. Oklahoma tease where the sky goes dark and the air changes and you brace for the storm, and then nothing happens and the heat returns worse than before. Marcus and Dylan drove out to Hargrove Salvage in the shop's flatbed at 7:30 in the morning. Dylan had barely spoken during the drive, his long legs folded in the passenger seat, earbuds in, watching the flat landscape pass with the particular detachment of a teenager who has agreed to something without being fully convinced it was a good idea. Loading the truck was harder than Marcus expected. The flat tires made it difficult to roll, and he ended up having to use the salvage yard's small loader to push the F800 up the ramps. The yard supervisor, a thick-necked man named Dale Crosswick who wore his salt and pepper hair under a grease-stained Hargrove cap, helped them strap it down without being asked, which Marcus appreciated. "Do you know anything about the history of this one?" Marcus asked him as they finished tightening the straps. Dale squinted at the truck like he was trying to remember something. "Came in about 2 years ago, maybe a little more. Tow company brought it in. Vehicle was abandoned on private property out near Claremore. The owner of the property didn't want it, didn't know whose it was, so they called us. We ran the VANG, but the registration had lapsed and there was no active owner on file. Any idea how long it had been sitting out there before the tow?" Dale shrugged. "Hard to say. Could have been a year. Could have been 5 years. The property owner said it was there when he bought the land, and he'd owned it out 3 years. He looked at the truck again. Weird thing though, the cag was completely empty when it came in. I mean clean. Like somebody had gone through it very deliberately. No paperwork, no tools, nothing in the glove box. Just those old gloves on the seat." He paused, and that welded tank, That was already done when it came in? Yep. Our guys noticed it when they were doing the intake assessment. We flagged it internally, considered calling it into the county, figured there might be something in there. But we had a lawyer look at it, and he said without a warrant or a specific complaint, we couldn't open a sealed tank just because it seemed odd. So it sat. Dale scratched the back of his neck. Between you and me, I'm a little glad it's not my problem anymore. Marcus looked at the truck on the flatbed. Yeah, he said quietly, I hear that. They got the truck to the shop by 9 a.m. The effort of unloading it, inflating the tires enough to roll it inside, and positioning it in the main bay, took another hour. Ricky, who had arrived to open up, watched the whole operation with wide-eyed curiosity, circling the truck with his hands in his back pockets. What are we doing with this? Ricky asked. Parting it out, Marcus said. Frame's good, engine might be salvageable. I want to assess everything before we start pulling anything off. What about the tank? Marcus was already crouching to look at it from below. The fuel tank on a 1989 F800 was mounted underneath the cab. A rectangular metal tank designed to hold about 40 gallons. This one had clearly been modified. The standard filler neck had been removed and the opening welded over, cleanly, as the man at the auction had said. A professional bead, even continuous, no gaps. Whoever had done this had known what they were doing. Marcus pressed his palm flat against the bottom of the tank and felt a faint vibration, or thought he did. Not mechanical, not a sound, just the subtle sensation of mass, of weight distribution that wasn't empty. There's something in it, Dylan said. Marcus looked up. His son was crouching beside him, looking at the tank with that same careful, analytical expression he brought to everything. You felt it too? Marcus asked. It's not resonating like an empty tank would, Dylan said. He knocked on the bottom of the tank with his knuckle, a dull, thick sound, not hollow, empty tank's echo. This doesn't. Marcus stood up slowly. He looked at Ricky. Ricky looked back at him with the expression of someone who is very interested in what happens next, but also slightly concerned about being involved in it. We're going to need the angle grinder, Marcus said. To cut the weld? Ricky asked. To cut the weld. Dylan straightened up beside him. Dad, before we do that, shouldn't we think about this for a second? Marcus looked at his son. I mean, Dylan continued, choosing his words carefully. Dale told you the salvage yard flagged it and considered reporting it. And the truck came from an abandoned property with no traceable owner and a deliberately emptied cab. He paused. If there's something in that tank that somebody sealed in there on purpose, then it's been sitting in the salvage yard for over 2 years, and nobody's come for it, Marcus said. That we know of. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Get the angle grinder, he said to Ricky. It took 20 minutes to cut through the weld. Marcus worked slowly, carefully, letting the blade bite through the bead in sections, pausing to let the metal cool. Dylan stood back. Ricky stood further back. The shop smelled of hot metal and old oil. When the last section of the weld gave way, Marcus set down the grinder and picked up a flat pry bar. He worked the edge of the filler plate loose, metal groaning against metal, until it came free with a sound like a seal breaking. The smell hit them immediately. Not gasoline, not rot. Something dry and papery and faintly chemical, the smell of things that have been enclosed for a very long time. Marcus grabbed his flashlight and shone it into the tank opening. For a moment, he didn't move. Then he said, Dylan, come here. Dylan stepped forward and looked over his father's shoulder into the opening. The tank was packed. Not completely. There was perhaps a third of the volume still open, which explained the non-hollow resonance. But the rest of the space was filled with objects wrapped in heavy-duty plastic sheeting, the kind used for vapor barriers in construction. The plastic had been sealed with what looked like industrial tape, wrapped multiple times around each bundle. There were 4 bundles visible, each one roughly the size of a thick hardcover book. Marcus reached in with a gloved hand and carefully pulled the nearest bundle out. It was heavier than it looked. He set it on the workbench and after a pause, cut through the tape with a utility knife. Layers of plastic peeled back. Inside was money, United States currency, banded in the standard Federal Reserve rubber band stacks. Each band labeled $10,000. Marcus counted the stacks in that first bundle without touching them. 10 stacks, $100,000. He looked up at Dylan. Dylan was staring at the bundle with an expression that was equal parts disbelief and the specific alarm of someone who has read enough history to know that money found in sealed trucks does not typically come with simple explanations. Ricky had taken 3 steps back and was standing near the shop entrance, hands at his sides, saying nothing at all. "Okay," Marcus said. He put the bundle down carefully, as if it were fragile. He looked at the 3 remaining bundles still in the tank. He did the math. 4 bundles, $100,000 each, $400,000. "Dad," Dylan said. His voice was very steady, which meant he was working hard to keep it that way. "We have to talk about what we're going to do." "I know," Marcus said. "Like right now, before anyone else knows this exists." Marcus looked at Ricky. Ricky raised both hands, palms out. "I didn't see anything," Ricky said. "Ricky," Marcus said, "go take a long lunch. Go to Sonic or something. Take an hour." "I'm gone," Ricky said. And was. Marcus and Dylan stood in the quiet shop, the money on the workbench between them. The old truck looming behind them in the bay, the August heat pressing against the corrugated walls. "Start talking," Marcus said. "What are you thinking?" Dylan pulled up a stool and sat down. He was 16 years old, and in that moment he looked both younger and older than his age. "I'm thinking about where this money came from," he said. "Somebody packed $400,000 into a sealed fuel tank on a truck that was then abandoned on private property with a cleaned-out cab and no traceable ownership." "That's not an accident, Dad. That's somebody hiding something. Or somebody who died before they could come back for it. Or somebody who's very much alive and very interested in keeping this quiet, and who would be extremely upset to find out that their money ended up in a salvage auction for $100. Marcus sat down on the other stool. He rubbed his face with both hands, a gesture Dylan had seen 1,000 times, the one that meant his father was doing serious calculations. "We could report it to the police," Marcus said. "If we do that, we lose everything. Best case, it's tied up in evidence for years. Worst case, it belongs to someone dangerous, and now there's a paper trail that leads directly to this shop. We could keep it and say nothing, and spend the rest of our lives waiting for someone to knock on that door." Marcus looked at his son. "Then what?" Dylan pulled his phone out of his pocket and set it on the workbench beside the money. "I think before we decide anything," he said slowly, "we need to know whose money this is. Because the answer to that question changes everything." Marcus nodded. "How do you propose we find that out?" Dylan turned the phone over in his hands, thinking. Then he looked up. The VIN on the truck. "You said the registration had lapsed and there was no active owner. But that doesn't mean there's no history. It just means whoever owned it last didn't renew the registration." He tapped the phone against his palm. "There are services, people use them for used car research. Full vehicle history, all ownership records, lien history, accident reports. If we can trace who owned this truck, even going back 10 or 15 years, we might find a thread." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he got up, walked to the cab of the truck, and photographed the VIN plate on the dashboard. He came back and handed his phone to Dylan. "Find it," he said. The search took Dylan most of that afternoon, sitting at the old desk in Marcus's office while his father worked on a legitimate job in the front bay, a brake replacement on a 2019 Honda Accord that had come in that morning. Normalcy as a kind of armor. Dylan ran the VIN through 3 different services, cross-referencing the results. What emerged was a fractured, incomplete history, but there was enough to build something from. The truck had been purchased new in 1989 by a company called Meridian Freight Solutions. Based in Tulsa, Meridian Freight had operated as a regional carrier through the 90s, running delivery routes across northeastern Oklahoma and into Arkansas. The company had dissolved in 2003, bankruptcy, according to the Oklahoma Secretary of State records Dillon found online. After dissolution, the truck had been sold at a business liquidation auction. The buyer was listed as an individual, Robert C. Faulkner, with a Claremore, Oklahoma address. Robert Faulkner had renewed the registration twice, in 2004 and 2006. After 2006, there was nothing. No renewals, no transfer of title, no record of sale. Dillon sat back in the chair and stared at the screen. Robert Faulkner, Claremore, Oklahoma. He typed the name into a search engine. What came back made him go very still. He sat there reading for 4 minutes. Then he got up, walked to the bay entrance, and said, "Dad, you need to come see this." Marcus set down his wrench and followed his son into the office. Dillon turned the laptop screen to face him. There was a news article from the Tulsa World, dated September 14, 2007. Local businessman Robert Faulkner missing. Family fears foul play. Marcus read the article in silence. Robert Charles Faulkner, 52, owner of Faulkner Construction and Excavation in Claremore, had been reported missing by his wife, Patricia Faulkner, after failing to return home on the evening of September 11, 2007. Faulkner was described as a prominent figure in Rogers County business circles, known for his work on commercial and municipal construction projects across northeastern Oklahoma. His truck, described in the article as a dark-colored commercial vehicle, had not been found. The article noted that investigators were looking into Faulkner's business dealings, citing unspecified financial irregularities discovered during a preliminary review. Robert Faulkner had never been found. Marcus straightened up from the screen. He and Dillon looked at each other. "He disappeared in 2007, Dillon said. "His truck, our truck, was last registered in 2006, a year before he went missing, which means he might have sealed the money in the tank before he disappeared," Marcus said. "Whether he was running from something or hiding it from someone or planning to come back for it, or someone made him disappear specifically because of what was in this truck," Dillon said. "And whoever that was didn't know where the truck was. The shop was very quiet except for the distant sound of traffic on South Peoria. We need to put those bundles back in the tank," Marcus said finally. "And we need to think very carefully before we tell anyone anything." Dillon nodded. But as he was closing the laptop, something caught his eye. A line near the bottom of the article he hadn't read yet. Among those interviewed by investigators was Faulkner's former business partner, Gerald Mast, who told reporters he had not spoken to Faulkner in several months prior to the disappearance. Mast, who operates Mast Land Development out of Tulsa, declined further comment. Dillon stared at the name. Then he opened a new browser tab and typed, "Gerald Mast, Tulsa, Oklahoma." The first result was a LinkedIn profile. The second was a company website. The third was a Tulsa Business Journal article from 3 months ago. Mast Land Development announced a $47 million mixed-use project in downtown Tulsa. Gerald Mast was very much alive, and very much still in Tulsa. The next morning, Marcus didn't open the shop. He told Ricky to take the day off, paid, which he couldn't really afford, but he needed the space. He and Dillon sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and everything they'd found printed out on paper, spread between them like evidence at a trial. Dillon had spent the previous evening building a timeline. It was handwritten in his precise architectural script on 3 sheets of notebook paper, and it told a story that neither of them liked. Robert Faulkner had been, by all available accounts, a successful contractor in the Claremore-Tulsa corridor through the 1990s and early 2000s. Faulkner Construction had worked on municipal water infrastructure, commercial foundations, private land grading, the kind of steady, unglamorous work that builds a solid regional business. He and Gerald Mast had been partners from roughly 1995 to 2001, when they had apparently separated amicably, with Faulkner keeping the construction arm and Mast taking the land development side of their shared operation. Then, in 2006, something changed. Dillon had found it in a series of archived county commission meeting minutes, dry public documents that most people never read. Beginning in early 2006, Faulkner Construction had been awarded a series of unusually large contracts for grading and excavation work on parcels owned or recently acquired by Mast Land Development. The contracts were substantial, totaling, by Dillon's rough calculation, somewhere between $1.8 and $2.3 million over 18 months. But several of the project addresses, when Dillon checked them against county parcel maps, corresponded to land that had not yet been developed and, in 2 cases, had since been sold to third parties without any construction ever being completed. Money flowing from Mast Land Development to Faulkner Construction for work that either wasn't done or couldn't be verified. "It's a pass-through," Dillon said, tapping the timeline. Mast was funneling money through Faulkner's company, paying for fake contracts, getting the money back in some form, cash probably, and using it for something else, or just laundering it. Why through Faulkner? Because Faulkner was legitimate, an established contractor with a real business history and real equipment. Bank transactions between 2 active businesses look a lot more normal than unexplained cash deposits. Dillon paused, but at some point Faulkner must have decided he wanted out, or decided he was owed more, or decided he was going to talk. Marcus looked at the timeline, and then he disappeared. And $400,000 disappeared with him, Dillon said. Except it didn't disappear. It ended up in the fuel tank of his truck, which ended up on an abandoned property outside Claremore for somewhere between 3 and 8 years, which then ended up in Hargrove Salvage for 2 more years, which then ended up in our shop for $100. Marcus picked up his coffee, held it without drinking, set it back down. "Gerald Mast," he said. "Gerald Mast," Dillon confirmed. "Worth about $30 million now, according to his company's website. Active member of the Tulsa Chamber of Commerce. Donated the new wing at a children's hospital in 2022. Dillon folded his hands on the table. A man that prominent, with that much to lose, if he knew that money still existed somewhere, and that it could be traced back to him. He'd want it gone, Marcus said. The money and anyone who knew about it. The word anyone sat in the kitchen between them like something solid. Dillon looked at his father steadily. "So what do we do?" Marcus was quiet for a long time. Long enough for the refrigerator to cycle on and off, for a garbage truck to pass outside on the street, for the light through the kitchen window to shift slightly as a cloud moved. "I need to talk to someone I trust," he said finally. "Someone who knows how these things work." "Who?" Marcus looked at his son. "You remember Sandra Okafor?" Dillon thought for a moment. "The woman who handled the divorce thing. The lawyer." "She's not a divorce lawyer. She handles all kinds of civil work. And she's sharp." Marcus stood up from the table. "More importantly, she's never done any work for Mast. I'm going to call her." Sandra Okafor ran a 3-person practice on East 10th Street in the Midtown neighborhood of Tulsa, a clean, spare office in an old converted house, with law books on actual shelves, and a paralegal named June who had been with her for 12 years. Sandra was 44, Nigerian-American, with a reputation for being methodical, direct, and constitutionally opposed to wasted time. Marcus had met her during the divorce proceedings 4 years earlier and had come away with the impression that she was one of the few people he'd encountered professionally who said exactly what she meant. She agreed to see him that afternoon. Marcus went alone. He left Dillon at home with instructions to tell no one anything, not friends, not Ricky, nobody, and to keep the shop locked. Sandra listened to everything without interruption, which was one of the things Marcus had remembered about her. She sat behind her desk with her hands folded and her expression neutral, and she let him talk. When he was done, she was quiet for about 15 seconds. Then she said, "Show me the documentation your son found." Marcus laid the printed pages on her desk. She read through them slowly, turning each page with care. "The money is in your possession now," she said, not looking up from the papers. "In my shop, yes. And you haven't told police?" "No, or anyone besides your son and your employee. Ricky doesn't really know what we found. He left before we opened the first bundle. Sandra set the papers down and looked at him. All right. Here's where you stand to the best of my immediate assessment, and I want you to understand that this is preliminary. I'll need time to research properly. But the truck was purchased legitimately at a lawful auction. You own it. What's inside it, under standard property law, is a more complex question. Found property statutes vary by state, and currency found concealed in a purchased item triggers specific obligations. In Oklahoma, found property with an identifiable original owner typically requires a good faith attempt to locate that owner. If the owner cannot be found after a defined period, the finder may have a legitimate claim. Robert Faulkner is a missing person, Marcus said. Missing persons have estates, families. If Faulkner is legally presumed dead, and after nearly 18 years, there may be a legal determination in place, then his estate would be the relevant claimant. Sandra paused. However, Marcus repeated. If that money was the product of criminal activity, if your son's analysis of those contracts is correct and this was laundered, money flowing through Faulkner's company, then it may be subject to asset forfeiture, regardless of who holds it. She folded her hands again. And the deeper concern is not legal, Marcus. It's practical. The person you're describing masked if he's aware that money existed, and if he's been operating under the assumption that it disappeared with Faulkner, then the appearance of that money, or any investigation that traces its origins, puts him at serious risk. Serious enough that he would have strong motivation to prevent that. To come after me, Marcus said flatly. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you should understand the full landscape of what you're dealing with. Sandra picked up a pen and turned it in her fingers. What I need you to do is this. Don't move the money. Don't spend a dollar of it. Don't tell anyone else. Give me 48 hours to do some research on the Faulkner disappearance, en masse, on the Oklahoma found property statutes, and on the question of whether there's a federal angle here that I need to bring in another attorney to advise on. Federal angle. Money laundering at that scale often involves federal statutes, not just state ones, which means FBI jurisdiction, not just Tulsa PD. She looked at him steadily. If we do this right, and I mean very carefully right, there may be a path here that protects you legally, potentially yields a reward through proper channels, and ensures you're not standing alone when this becomes visible, because it will become visible. That's the one thing I can tell you with certainty. Marcus nodded slowly. 48 hours, he said. 48 hours. Go home. Act normal. Don't Google Gerald Mast from any device that's connected to your name or address. Marcus stood up to leave. At the door, Sandra said, Marcus, he turned. Your son sounds smart. He is, Marcus said. He's also 16, which means he's going to have a very hard time not talking about this. I'll talk to him. Do that tonight. Marcus did talk to Dylan that night, and Dylan listened with the focused, serious attention that Marcus had always found both reassuring and slightly humbling in his son. The sense that he was talking to someone who was genuinely processing, not just waiting to respond. I get it, Dylan said when Marcus had finished relaying Sandra's instructions. No talking, no searching, no movement, not from any device tied to us. Not on your phone, not on the school Wi-Fi, nothing. Dylan nodded. Then, Dad, can I ask you something? Go on. Do you think Faulkner is dead? Marcus thought about the question honestly, which he felt Dylan deserved. I think the money has been in that tank since at least 2007. I think whoever put it there hasn't come for it in 19 years. So either they're dead, or they're in a situation where they can't come for it, or they've long since given up on it. He paused. None of those options feel like a good story. Dylan was quiet. Then what about his family? The article mentioned a wife, Patricia Faulkner. That's something Sandra will look into. If she's still alive, she's spent 19 years not knowing what happened to her husband. Dylan's voice was even, but there was something underneath it, an empathy that Marcus recognized as genuine. That money, even if we can't keep it, even if it has to go through courts and processes, could tell her something, right? At least that there was something being hidden. That there was a reason. Marcus looked at his son for a long moment. Yeah, he said quietly. It could. They sat in the kitchen for a while after that, not talking, the house quiet around them. Marcus thought about Patricia Faulkner, whoever she was, wherever she'd been for 19 years. He thought about a woman waiting for an answer that never came. He thought about Dylan, sitting across from him at this kitchen table, choosing empathy over self-interest as a first instinct. He thought, I must have done something, right? Outside, the Oklahoma night was warm and still. In the shop across town, a 1989 Ford F800 sat in the bay with its fuel tank open and its secret, finally, in the light. 2 days later, Sandra Okafor called and told Marcus to come in. Her voice on the phone was measured and precise. I found Patricia Faulkner, she said, and I found something else, something that changes the picture considerably. Sandra's office felt smaller when Marcus arrived the next morning. Or maybe it was the documents spread across her desk that created that effect, the sense of accumulated evidence pressing against the available space. Sandra stood rather than sat, which Marcus had learned was a sign that she had things to say in a particular order and intended to say them without interruption. Patricia Faulkner is alive, Sandra began. She lives in Owasso now, remarried in 2015, last name is Holt. She runs a small landscaping business. Robert Faulkner was legally declared deceased in 2012. After 5 years missing, his estate went through probate. There were business debts, some personal assets, but the estate was relatively modest by the time it was settled. She paused. Notably, there was no large cash holding, no $400,000. Which tells us that the money in the tank was completely off the books, never declared, never part of any account Faulkner operated under his own name. So it can't have been legitimate business money, Marcus said. No, and this is where it gets complicated. Sandra picked up a stapled document from the desk, several pages, dense with text. I reached out, very discreetly, to a contact at a federal law firm that handles financial crime cases. I didn't give specifics, but I asked enough to understand the landscape, and here's what I learned. She set the document down and looked at him directly. Gerald Mast was the subject of a federal investigation in 2008 and 2009. Money laundering, fraud, potential connections to the misappropriation of municipal contract funds. The investigation was opened, in part, because of questions that arose after Faulkner's disappearance, investigators thought. Faulkner might have been a witness or a participant who could shed light on Mast's financial activities. Marcus was very still. The investigation was closed in 2010, Sandra continued. Officially, due to insufficient evidence, key transactions could not be verified, witnesses were unavailable, and the documentary trail had gaps that the prosecutors couldn't bridge to the standard required for federal charges. She let that settle. One of those gaps, I believe, based on what my contact described, was the inability to locate a specific set of cash transactions that were believed to have occurred between Mast and Faulkner in late 2006, a substantial amount. Described as, quote, off-ledger funds of unknown disposition. $400,000, Marcus said. Almost certainly, Sandra said. The money in that tank is, in all likelihood, the missing piece of a federal investigation that was closed 14 years ago because they couldn't find it. The room was very quiet. Marcus pressed both hands flat on his knees and looked at the floor for a moment. He was doing the calculation that he had been doing intermittently for the past 4 days, but now, with sharper numbers and clearer stakes. If we bring this forward, he said, and it reopens the investigation, Mast gets informed at some point that new evidence has emerged, Sandra said. There's no way around that. Ultimately, due process requires it. The question is timing, and the question is your protection in the interim. How long is the interim? Unknown. It depends on the federal agency's interest level, their current caseload, the quality of the new evidence. She paused. My contact believes that if the currency can be forensically linked to Mast, which is not guaranteed, but possible through banking record subpoenas, serial number tracking, and other means, there would be significant federal interest. Mast is considerably more prominent now than he was in 2008, a $47 million downtown project. Chamber of Commerce ties. Political relationships, which means he has more to lose, and more resources to protect what he has, Sandra said. Marcus looked up. Say it plainly, Sandra. She looked at him steadily. Gerald Mast is not a street criminal. He's a wealthy, well-connected businessman who has spent 2 decades building an image of legitimacy. If he learns that a mechanic in South Tulsa has found the missing evidence from a case that nearly destroyed him, evidence that could still destroy him, he will not respond with violence directly. He will respond with lawyers, with pressure, with every legal and semi-legal tool available to bury this. She paused. But if conventional tools don't work fast enough, and if he believes he's facing actual federal prosecution, a man like that with that much at stake, he becomes a different kind of threat, Marcus said. I want you to understand the full picture. You asked me to be direct. I did. Marcus sat back. What's the path forward that keeps Dylan and me safe? Sandra sat down finally. She picked up her pen. We go federal, not local police, not state. We contact the FBI field office in Tulsa, specifically the Financial Crimes Unit, and we do it through me, which means attorney-client privilege covers our communications. And your disclosure is made in a controlled, documented context where your cooperation is established from the first moment. She held the pen like a pointer. You document your purchase, the discovery, everything your son found. We present it as found property discovered in the course of legitimate business, which it is, with voluntary cooperation from the start. That establishes you as a witness and cooperator, not a person of interest. Will they protect us? If Mast finds out before I will make the protection ask explicit and formal, Sandra said. Whether they fulfill it depends on their assessment of the threat. But having it on record, made by an attorney, creates accountability. She folded her hands. Marcus, I've been doing this for 18 years. The people who get hurt in situations like this are the ones who try to handle it quietly on their own. The ones who go through proper channels with documentation and legal representation are a far less appealing target. Making you invisible to the process is no longer an option. This is too big. Making you the cooperative, documented, legally represented party who brought this forward voluntarily is the best protection available. Marcus thought about Dylan. He thought about the kitchen table and the timeline written in precise handwriting. He thought about Patricia Faulkner, Patricia Holt now, in Owasso, running her landscaping business, 19 years past a disappearance that had never been explained. What about Patricia Holt? He asked. Does she? I would recommend against any direct contact, Sandra said firmly. Not yet. If and when there's a federal proceeding, she will be notified through proper channels. It's not your job to deliver that news, and doing so could complicate the legal picture. But she'd finally know, Marcus said, that there was something. That her husband wasn't just, yes, Sandra said more gently. She would. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, make the call, Sandra, let's go forward. The 48 hours that follow were the longest of Marcus Delano's life, longer than the night Garla told him she was leaving, longer than the day his father had his first stroke, and Marcus sat in the hospital waiting room for 6 hours not knowing. This was a different kind of long. This was the long of waiting for something to either detonate or disarm, and not knowing which it would be. He opened the shop. He replaced a water pump on a Dodge Ram. He did an oil change on a Nissan Sentra. He talked to customers about their cars with the normal, competent ease of a man who knew his trade, and he felt each time like he was performing a role in a film about his own life. Dylan went to school. He came home and did homework at the kitchen table and asked no questions Marcus wasn't ready to answer because he understood without being told that the machinery was in motion, and asking questions about machinery in motion doesn't make it move faster. Ricky noticed something was different. Marcus could tell from the way the kid moved around the shop. A little quieter than usual, a little more careful. But Ricky was smart enough not to ask. On the evening of the second day, Sandra called. "They want to meet," she said. "FBI, 2 agents from the Financial Crimes Unit. Day after tomorrow, my office, 10 a.m. You bring the documentation. I'll handle the legal framing. The money stays in the shop. The money stays in the shop and you don't touch it. I'm going to advise them to come with a seizure order, which means they take custody of it immediately. That's actually the safest outcome for you. Once it's in federal custody, your liability ends and your cooperation is established." "Okay," Marcus said. "Marcus," a pause. "Are you all right?" He thought about the question honestly. "No," he said, "but I'll be fine." "That's the right answer," Sandra said. He told Dylan that night. All of it, Sandra's findings, the federal investigation from 2008, the meeting in 2 days. He laid it out plainly, the way he would want someone to lay something out for him without cushioning or dramatic framing. Dylan listened. When Marcus finished, Dylan said, "You made the right call." "I think so," Marcus said. "I'm less sure about what happens after." "The right call doesn't guarantee a good outcome," Dylan said. "It just means you can live with whatever outcome comes." Marcus looked at his son. "When did you get this wise?" Dylan almost smiled. "I've had a weird week." They sat together on the front porch for a while that night. The Oklahoma sky enormous and dark above them. The neighborhood around them ordinary and quiet, and entirely unaware of the thing that had been moving through their lives since a $100 bid at a salvage auction in Broken Arrow. A car passed. A neighbor walked a dog. Somewhere down the block, a kid on a bicycle made a slow circle under a streetlight. Marcus thought, this is what you protect, not the money, not the principal. This. He thought about Gerald Mast in his Tulsa office, reviewing the $47 million project, signing documents, attending dinners, living the accumulated life of a man who had made something disappear 19 years ago and believed it had stayed disappeared. He thought about Robert Faulkner, whatever had happened to him, wherever he was. A man who had sealed $400,000 into a fuel tank and vanished, taking a secret with him that had taken nearly 2 decades to find its way back into the light. He thought about Patricia Holt in Owasso, waking up tomorrow morning without knowing that tomorrow was the day the answer she'd stopped waiting for began its long way back to her. Then he went inside, set his alarm for 6:30, and did his best to sleep. 2 mornings later, Marcus sat in Sandra Okafor's office across from 2 FBI agents, Special Agent Diane Purcell, a woman in her early 40s with close-cropped gray hair and an economy of expression that reminded Marcus of good poker players, and Special Agent Roy Bellum, younger, heavy-set, who said little but wrote down everything. Sandra sat beside Marcus. The documentation Dylan had compiled was in a manila folder on the desk between them. Diane Purcell opened the folder and read in silence for 6 minutes. When she looked up, she said, "Mr. Delano, I want to be very clear about something. You are here as a voluntary cooperating witness, and everything you've brought us today was obtained legally and disclosed voluntarily. Nothing in this meeting changes your status as a private citizen who made a legal purchase and came forward in good faith." "I understand," Marcus said. "I also want to be clear," she continued, her tone unchanged, "that the name you've provided and the documentation your son compiled is consistent with a matter that this office has prior interest in. I can't give you details. What I can tell you is that what you've brought us is significant." Marcus nodded. "We'll need to take custody of the currency today. I'm prepared to execute a property receipt that documents the full amount and your status as the finder, which will be relevant to any future legal proceedings regarding the disposition of those funds." Sandra told me about the found property statutes, Marcus said. There's a process, Purcell said. It takes time, but your cooperation will be noted at every stage. She closed the folder. We'll also need to discuss, briefly, your daily routine, your shop, your home, your son's school. Standard precautionary assessment. She looked at him steadily. I don't want to alarm you, but we take our witnesses seriously. How long before Mast finds out? Marcus asked. Purcell chose her words carefully. Investigations of this nature move through channels that are, for a period, non-public. The target is not informed until the investigative phase reaches a specific legal threshold. That process typically takes, she glanced at Bellum, who gave a small nod, several weeks at minimum. Several weeks. You'll have our contact information. Any unusual activity, any communication from parties unknown, you call immediately. Marcus looked at Sandra, who gave him a small, precise nod that meant, this is what good looks like. Take it. He turned back to Agent Purcell. All right, he said. Let's do this. They came to the shop that afternoon with a van and 2 additional agents. The money was removed from the fuel tank carefully, with documentation and photographs at every stage, placed into evidence containers, and transported. The whole process took just under 2 hours. When they left, the shop felt very empty. Ricky stood in the bay looking at the space where the bundles had been, the old F800 still hulking in the corner. So that's it? Ricky asked. For now, Marcus said. What happens next? Marcus picked up a wrench and turned back to the Honda on the lift. We go back to work, he said. Ricky looked at him, then nodded slowly, and picked up his own wrench. 6 weeks passed. Marcus fixed cars. He paid Ricky's wages. He made a partial payment on the bank loan that reduced the overdue balance, enough to stop the automated collection calls. He paid Dylan's registration fee for the engineering program, $140 from his regular account. Not a windfall, just money earned and carefully allocated. The FBI made no public statements. There was nothing in the Tulsa world, nothing on the local news. Whatever was happening in those federal offices and conference rooms was happening in the invisible register, where large institutional processes operate, slow, thorough, and entirely out of sight. Agent Purcell called twice. Both calls were brief. Are you well? Anything unusual? Good, we'll be in touch. The quality of those calls, their brevity, their consistency, was somehow reassuring. It meant something was moving. It meant someone was watching. Marcus didn't ask for details. Sandra had advised him not to. On a Tuesday morning in late September, when the Oklahoma heat had finally broken and the air had that first faint edge of autumn that made the whole state feel briefly like a different place, Marcus was under a lifted F-150 doing a suspension inspection when his phone buzzed on the workbench. He slid out and looked at the screen. It was a number he didn't recognize. He almost let it go to voicemail, then answered. Marcus Delano. Yes. This is Thomas Garrity. I'm an attorney in the Oklahoma City office of Farrell & Schoen. I'm calling on behalf of a client who asked me to reach out to you directly. A pause. My client's name is Patricia Holt. She was formerly Patricia Faulkner. Marcus sat down on the rolling stool. His hand tightened on the phone. I'm here, he said. Thomas Garrity explained in the careful, measured language of a lawyer managing a sensitive situation that Patricia Holt had been contacted by the FBI approximately 2 weeks earlier as part of an ongoing investigation. She had been informed, in broad terms, of the discovery made at a salvage shop in Tulsa and its implications for the unresolved disappearance of her first husband. She had asked, through her attorney, whether it would be possible to speak with the person who had found the vehicle. The FBI had provided his name with his consent, on file from the initial disclosure meeting. Mrs. Holt doesn't want anything from you, Garrity said. I want to be clear about that. She's not pursuing any legal claim against you, and she's not asking for anything regarding the investigation. She simply wanted. He paused, as if searching for the right framing. She wanted to say something to the person who found it, if you're willing. Marcus looked across the shop. Ricky was at the parts shelf, back turned, pretending not to listen. The old F8U still sat in the corner bay. Marcus hadn't parted it out yet. He wasn't sure why. Every time he considered starting, something held him back. Yes, Marcus said, I'm willing. They met on a Thursday afternoon at a coffee shop on East 86th Street in Owasso, a clean, unremarkable place with wood tables and the smell of roasted beans and the quiet background hum of a weekday afternoon. Marcus arrived 5 minutes early. He sat at a corner table and ordered a black coffee and waited with the particular stillness of a man who has learned, over the past 2 months, how to be patient with things he cannot control. Patricia Holt arrived at 2 o'clock exactly. She was in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair cut to the shoulder and the kind of weathered, purposeful face that comes from years of outdoor work and practical living. She wore a light jacket over a flannel shirt, and she moved through the coffee shop with a directness that reminded Marcus, faintly, of Sandra Okafor, the manner of someone who had long since stopped performing ease and had arrived at the real thing. She sat down across from him without ceremony. Mr. Delano, she said. Marcus, please. Patricia. She looked at him, a long, assessing look, not unkind. You bought Robert's truck at an auction. Yes, ma'am. I didn't know it was his when I bought it, I know. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup that had appeared in front of her. The agents told me how it happened, the $100. A faint, complicated expression moved across her face. Not quite a smile, not quite grief. Something in between. Robert would have found that funny. They'd have last secret ended up going for $100. Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Patricia looked down at her cup. They told me, the agents, that what you found is going to be used as evidence. That it fills in something that couldn't be filled in before. She paused. They won't tell me everything. I understand that. But they told me enough to know that there was a reason. That he didn't just walk away. Her voice was very steady. I've spent 19 years not knowing whether my husband left voluntarily or whether something happened to him. Whether the first was abandoned or... She stopped, started again. That's a particular kind of not knowing. It has a weight to it that doesn't go away. I'm sorry, Marcus said. It was inadequate. He said it anyway. The not knowing is what breaks you, Patricia continued, as if following a thought she'd had many times before and was finally speaking aloud to. Someone who wasn't a therapist or a family member, not the loss. Loss you can survive. You learn to build around it, but not knowing doesn't let you build. It stays open. She looked up at him. You closed it. Whatever happens next in the courts with the investigation, you close the opening. Marcus felt something move in his chest that he didn't have a clean name for. He thought about Dylan, about Dylan's face when they'd pulled the first bundle out of the tank, about the 16-year-old who had responded to the discovery of $400,000 by immediately asking whose it was and what it had cost. My son helped, Marcus said. He found the connection to your husband. He's the one who figured out what it meant. Patricia looked at him with a new quality of attention. How old is he? 16. She was quiet for a moment. What's his name? Dylan. She nodded slowly. Tell Dylan, she said carefully, that what he did mattered. That's the kind of thing a person needs to hear when they're 16 and trying to figure out what kind of person to be. Marcus had to look away for a second. At the window, at the ordinary street outside, at a woman pushing a stroller past the coffee shop on a regular Thursday afternoon in Owasso. I will, he said. I'll tell him exactly that. They talked for 40 minutes. Not about the investigation. Neither of them had information the other lacked. And both of them understood, without saying it, that the legal machinery would proceed on its own schedule and in its own way. They talked about the truck, and about the salvage yard, and about the particular texture of the gamble Marcus had taken with his last $100. Patricia laughed once, a real laugh, brief and surprised. When Marcus described the flat tires and the man in the canvas vest at the auction advising him not to bother with lot 14, Robert always said the best things were the ones nobody else wanted, she said. He wasn't wrong, Marcus said. When they stood to leave, Patricia extended her hand. Marcus shook it. I hope your shop does well, she said, genuinely. I hope, Marcus started, then stopped. What he wanted to say was, I hope you get what you need from all of this. I hope it gives you something. But it sounded insufficient for the size of what he meant. I know, Patricia said, as if she'd heard the rest of it. Me too. She walked out of the coffee shop and he watched her through the window, walking down the sidewalk with that same direct, purposeful stride toward her car, toward Owasso, toward the life she had built in the long patient years of not knowing. Marcus finished his coffee. Then he drove back to South Peoria. 3 weeks after the meeting with Patricia Holt, the Tulsa World ran a front-page story. Federal grand jury indicts Tulsa developer Gerald Mast on money laundering, fraud charges. Marcus read it on his phone at 7 in the morning, standing in the shop before Ricky arrived. The article was long and detailed, the product of a federal investigation that had been quietly reconvened following the discovery of new material. Evidence, which the piece described only as financial documents and currency, recovered from a vehicle connected to the 2007 disappearance of Claremore contractor Robert Faulkner. Marcus's name did not appear in the article. Neither did Dylan's. Neither did the shop on South Peoria, or the $100 bid, or the sealed fuel tank, or any of the specific mechanics of how this had come to be. The article detailed the charges: wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice. It described Mast's alleged use of a series of front companies and false contract arrangements to move undeclared income through legitimate business operations over a decade. It noted that investigators were also reviewing the circumstances of Faulkner's 2007 disappearance in light of new information, though no charges related to that had yet been filed. Gerald Mast's attorney had issued a statement calling the charges baseless and politically motivated. Marcus set his phone down on the workbench. He stood in the empty shop for a moment, the hydraulic lift still broken, the orange plastic chair still cracked and uncomfortable in the waiting area, the coffee machine that worked only when it felt like it rattling through its morning cycle. He thought, it's enough. It doesn't have to be everything. It's enough. He picked up his phone and sent Dylan a text. Check the Tulsa World website. Front page. Dylan's reply came 4 minutes later. He was probably already at school, reading it on his phone under a desk somewhere. Wow. A pause. Then, are we in there? Marcus smiled. No, he typed back, we're not in there. Another pause. Longer this time. Good, Dylan wrote. We don't need to be. In November, Marcus received a certified letter from the U.S. Attorney's office informing him that the currency recovered from the vehicle he had purchased, $400,000 in United States currency, was designated as evidence in an ongoing federal prosecution. Upon conclusion of the case, pursuant to Oklahoma state statute and federal found property guidelines, he would be notified of his eligibility to apply for a finder's claim against any uncontested portion of the funds. The letter was dry and formal, and entirely without drama. It made no promises, it offered no timeline. Marcus filed it in a folder in his desk drawer and went back to work. He didn't spend the next months waiting for the money. He'd done the thinking about that already. In the weeks when everything was uncertain about what it would mean if it came, and what it would mean if it didn't, he'd decided that his life couldn't be organized around a thing that might not happen. He'd decided that the $100 spent and the decision made were their own kind of return regardless of what came after. So he fixed cars. He paid his bills slowly, steadily, one overdue balance at a time. He got the hydraulic lift repaired in December, which cost $1,100 he borrowed from his own home equity line and would spend 8 months paying back, but which doubled the shop's daily capacity. He hired Ricky full-time in January, $18 an hour. Health coverage through the state marketplace. The conversation, accompanied by the most surprised expression Ricky Suarez had ever worn. He took Dylan to a Oklahoma State open house in February, watched his son walk through the engineering building with the focused, proprietary air of someone deciding whether a place was worthy of them, and thought, he's going to be fine. He was always going to be fine. On a Saturday in March, a warm, clear day, the first real hint of the spring that was coming, Marcus was in the back of the shop working on the F800. He had finally decided what to do with it. The engine was more salvageable than he'd initially thought. The block was solid. The damage was mostly surface, worn seals, a cracked intake manifold, injectors that needed cleaning. The transmission needed work but wasn't beyond repair. The frame, as the man at the auction had said, was genuinely solid. With proper restoration of the tires already done and a new set of seals and a refurbished intake, the engine might run. More than that, the cab was intact. The body, under its oxidized gray-brown patina, was structurally sound. The bench seat was cracked but could be reupholstered. The dashboard was faded but unbroken. Marcus had been working on it in the off hours, an hour here, an hour there, after the paying work was done. Not because there was a business case for it. Not because he intended to sell it. He couldn't entirely explain it, except that the truck deserved to run. After everything it had carried, everything it had held in silence for 19 years, it deserved to move under its own power again. Dylan was there on that Saturday morning, helping. He had become useful in the shop in a way that had nothing to do with any pressure from Marcus, and everything to do with genuine curiosity, the engineering student's instinct to understand how physical systems worked, to trace causality from symptom to source. He was good with his hands in a methodical, patient way, different from Marcus's intuitive way, but complementary to it. They worked together on the intake manifold for 2 hours, the radio playing low in the background, the morning light coming in clean through the open bay doors. At some point, without planning it, Marcus said, "I've been thinking about the shop name." Dylan looked up from the manifold. "What about it? Your grandfather called it Delano and Sons. I kept it because I didn't want to change something he'd built." Marcus set down a wrench. "But you're going to be an engineer. You're not going to be here every day." "I could be here on weekends," Dylan said. "Yeah? I'm not going anywhere far. Stillwater's an hour away." Dylan looked at him steadily. "And I like working here. When it's like this." Marcus looked around the shop. The worn tools on the walls, the oil-stained floor, the orange plastic chairs, the coffee machine, the hydraulic lift, finally working. "Delano and Sons," he said. "Plural," Dylan said. "That's still accurate." Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "I guess it is." Sometime in the late afternoon, when the manifold was back in place and the engine was assembled enough to attempt a first start, Marcus got behind the wheel of the F800 for the first time. The cab smelled of old dust and the ghost of whatever pine scent had once inhabited that bleached air freshener. The bench seat creaked under him. The cracked windshield framed the far wall of the shop in a long diagonal line. Dylan stood at the engine bay, one hand on the open hood. Ricky leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, affecting the posture of someone who was merely passing through, but who had positioned himself carefully to see everything. Marcus turned the key. The engine coughed, labored, went quiet. He waited 10 seconds, turned it again. This time it caught rough, loud, irregular, but unmistakably running. A sound like something waking from a very long sleep, disoriented and clattering, and gradually finding its rhythm. Marcus felt the vibration come up through the seat and the steering wheel, felt the whole cab shudder with the effort of a machine, insisting on its own continued existence. Dylan looked up from the engine bay with an expression Marcus had been waiting his whole life to see on his son's face, pure, uncomplicated, 16 years old, and completely surprised delight. It runs, Dylan said. It runs, Marcus confirmed. The engine settled into a rough, idle, not smooth. There was still work to do. There was always still work to do. But running, turning over, moving the way things are supposed to move when they're fixed, Ricky said from the doorway. Man, just that. Just man. The most complete word for the moment. Marcus sat in the cab for a minute, his hands on the steering wheel, the engine shaking the world gently around him. He thought about $100 bid and a sealed tank and a dead investigation and a woman in Owasso who had finally gotten something she'd stopped letting herself want. He thought about 19 years of silence breaking open in a shop on South Peoria Avenue on an August morning that had started like every other August morning and turned into something else entirely. He thought, this is what repair looks like. Not dramatic, not complete. Just the thing running again that wasn't running before. He turned off the ignition. The engine quieted. The shop was peaceful in the way it sometimes was on slow afternoons, warm, oil-smelling, full of the specific dignity of useful work. Marcus Delano climbed down from the cab, picked up a rag, and wiped his hands. All right, he said to no one and everyone. Let's get back to work.